Hi everybody, this is Dina Iordanova. I will be talking about historiography today. It is my intention to stick to the topic that I had selected for a presentation I would have made back in March when the event was cancelled. Of course, today there have been such disruptions that I believe we all have interest to talk about the changes in the field of film festivals imposed by COVID-19, but I thought that it was not such a good idea to let our discourse being hijacked completely by these discussions, so I decided to stick to the original plan. I would like to apologize for a presentation that is far from perfect. I feel extremely awkward recording my own voice. I have no experience doing this type of presentation. I really need live audience to be able to make eye contact and gesticulate and essentially present what I'm talking about live. But I will try to talk about historiography and new historicism today. So I'm starting with a tentative research question, which many of us use in different modified forms, namely what is the impact of whichever film festival we do a case study of, and very often we work on a specific film festival, on the international discourses either on film historiography or on some ideological matters such as decolonization, racism, gender, or matters of this type. So traditional approaches, if used in the classical versions we know them, have restrictions, and most certainly our field is one of interdisciplinary approaches. So I would like to look very briefly at various approaches that are used to answer such a research question. First of all, historical methods. Now, the traditional historical methods mainly rely, sometimes solely rely, on the so-called sources or archival documents, something which we can discover in a vault of documents related to the event. And we have to be faithful to these sources. Very rarely we can use other things to create an interpretative framework. So very often the interpretative framework for these historical sources and documents is either quietly implied or simply lost, and the study becomes just too verbal. It is this shortage of traditional historical studies that the so-called new historicism, introduced by Stephen Greenblatt some decades ago, is trying to correct. So I am a sympathizer of new historicism approaches. Then traditional film studies, still mainly based on textual analysis, but also in the field of film festival studies, mainly evolving around cinephilia discourses, are still struggling to let go of the focus on film, but need to integrate more sociology, more historiography, and more political economy to start making better sense. Too many studies are focusing on the big three festivals, Cannes, Venice, Berlinale. New studies that I'm reading are trying to say some very interesting things, to make important observations, and still continue giving examples again from Cannes, again from Venice, again from Berlinale, which is really narrowing the field because there is so much more that we should investigate and look at in order to understand, to answer this type of research questions. There are language limitations, be it the languages that the researcher is in command of, or the language of the materials available at a certain library. The internet is mainly in English, so certainly language limitations have a very big importance. I would like to see a combination of approaches in answering the research question. And I believe that the methodological triangulation is not only necessary, but it's also possible, especially now because we have evolved in such strong international networks, specifically in the film festival studies field, which is dominated by collaborative spirit. And I believe that we can work in transnational teams to some very interesting results. So I would very briefly like to give some more discussion about a possible multilateral case study and how the new historicism would contribute to this. My personal interest is on studies of festivals from the Cold War. And here is how I develop an example. So first of all, I have been pleased to see the emergence of a number of studies that are discussing various aspects of festivals during the Cold War. You wouldn't be surprised to see that most of these studies, of course, are again about the Big Three. One of the oldest I know about is Wolfgang Jakobsen's study on Berlinale, first published in 1990 and updated and republished many times since, but still only in German, I believe. I don't remember if it has an English language version. Studies on Cannes, studies on Venice, only in Italian. I recently read a very interesting History of Venice Film Festival in English by Peter Cowie. But the other ones which I have displayed here, which are more recent, start discovering and exploring more the role of other film festivals, which have also been very important during the Cold War. Specifically, I will be giving examples related to the study of Caroline Moin's Screened Encountered, which is about the Leipzig Documentary Festival, a festival which was very important, and I wrote the preface to this book when it was translated in English 2 years ago. And now I recently read the book by Rosen Jagalov, which only in one chapter of this book actually is highlighting the Tashkent Film Festival in Uzbekistan in the former Soviet Union, a festival that was bringing a constellation of third world filmmakers to the Soviet Union and providing some very interesting points of networking. Both these studies are written by historians, and this is what puts them in the center of my interest, because obviously if I want more historical studies to materialize, we need to talk about the methods historians are using, which we can probably bring across to the other side. I am myself not trained as historian, but lately I'm reflecting quite a bit on these issues. So here is a picture of the celebration during Tashkent Film Festival. But it is not just Tashkent Film Festival that has been of interest for me. I believe that all these festivals, which I am now calling B-tier film festivals, not necessarily for the FIAF classification, but more B-tier festivals is a term used by Zhen Zhang in her introduction to the Urban Generation Chinese Cinema book. And these are the secondary festivals that actually, she insists, sometimes play more important role in the discourse formation than the big international festivals, and I completely agree with this. So as far as Cold War time festivals are concerned, I believe some B-tier festivals are more important for the formation of discourses of, at that time it was peaceful coexistence or non-aligned movement, or like the terminology and ideology was different. So here I have provided a listing of several film festivals that I would dearly love to see more written about, and that have some studies dedicated to them, but far from sufficient. Still, there is writing, and we would like to see more. I have highlighted the two festivals that have been in the center of the two books that I just mentioned, and I'll be giving in the next slide some examples with this. So I'd like to see new historicism and the added dimensions that it gives to historical research applied as methodology more in the study of festivals, because it is not sufficient for us to rely only on what is in the archives, because the archives related to these festivals are often incomplete, often poorly organized, there is not enough on record, there are no reliable statistics, there has not been reliable monitoring. official data have not been presented as systematically as they have been presented in regard to other festivals. There are not so many reviews, there are not so many reports, not so much scholarship. And yet it is these festivals that play extremely important role, specifically for the networking of the world of filmmakers during the Cold War. And this is why I'm displaying a picture here where Jean-Loup Pasek of La Rochelle is standing with Adur Gopalakrishnan on the one hand, a famous Indian art house director, and Jerzy Kawalerovich from Poland, who is a very influential figure across the Third World, and I have seen his work influencing the style of filmmakers in the Arab world and in India. So it is at these festivals that these people were coming together and seeing each other's films, and we need to find a way where this is not recorded in the archives. Sometimes we can start with a single picture and find a way methodologically to piece together a study. So New Historicism is offering a number of additional approaches, and I'm displaying the approaches which I believe are of great importance here. But I must say that only the first one that has been listed here really has been integrated in the historical studies that I am reading about festivals, namely accepting and integrating personal testimonies and occasional anecdotes from participants in the festivals. This is because historians realize that what the source documents are presenting is simply not enough. What I believe is particularly important is to explore more the jury dynamics at these festivals, as well as the roles of other secondary and temporary players in the festival field. What I see in the book of Moen, for example, about the Leipzig Festival is that she very faithfully has explored the management, the programming team of Leipzig, but not sufficient attention has been paid to these people who come and go because they appear only in the sphere of the festival very temporarily. Methodologically, it is very difficult to trace the moves of people who only appear for the duration festival and then go and pursue their own agenda at some other festival. It is very difficult for the researcher to engage with some other festival that is of equal importance, but it cannot be included in the framework of this study. So this is why I am including contextualizing to concurrent events as a very important factor in the study of film festivals, because what is happening at Festival Y may actually strongly affect what is happening at Festival Z. But the historian focused on Festival Z without taking into consideration Festival Y cannot really see these dynamics between the festivals. So the role of the temporary players meaning some filmmakers who come to present a film to a festival, the jury members come and go and change every time, journalists who come and who cover this festival but then go and write reports about other festivals and of course discuss this first festival and so on. The dynamics of all these players is very important to be kept in the focus. Factoring the moves of what I have called soul traders, and really this is a topic that is very interesting for me. I have written about soul traders in some early pieces on festivals and very much would like to come and develop this more. Unfortunately, today's presentation is very short, so I decided to cut the slides that were relating to soul traders. Maybe some other time I'll talk about this. But soul traders are these people that actually weave together the network of festivals. Soul traders are those people that have some pockets of importance and that move from a festival to festival and actually create the festival world in a networked fashion. And they were such soul traders, very important during the Cold War. One of them was Ron Holloway, who passed away several years ago, an American journalist living in Berlin, who was linked with all these festivals that I mentioned, and this was his circuit, and he was traveling to all these festivals, and people like him were actually linking the important sphere of festivals. Then one thing which historians do not always realize is that it sometimes is important to zoom in on a particular period, because festivals may survive for very many years, like the Edinburgh International Film Festival, founded in 1947, managed to survive to today, but it is only fractions in the history of this festival that are of importance and worth zooming on, and luckily we have scholarship on these periods, whereas the other years have not been so important, and of course we are proud that this is a festival that has survived for so long. But from studies point of view, we can just select the important years in the history of the festival. And because the festival longevity is not really so important for the depth of historiographical study, I believe it's worthwhile to explore festivals that may have failed or may have closed or may have clearly gone into lessened importance, or that have may clearly change focus, like what has happened in Oberhausen. Oberhausen had completely one ideological profile during the Cold War, and it's quite a different type of festival today. Tashkent Film Festival no longer even exists. It doesn't mean we should not study it. On the contrary, the reason for which it does not exist is also part of the research question that we explore. And last but not least, I believe that such studies, as the research question is intended to study the transnational dynamics that the festival generates and proliferates, it is very important that we engage in cross-checking with transnational teams, namely not only to talk about how things looked from the point of view of the country where the festival was held, the context in which it was held, but also acknowledge that it is very important to fact check on the other side. I will stop at this as to not consume more time, but hopefully if we have a discussion and if we see each other face to face in some way, I will be able to elaborate more. I hope this was of some interest for you. Thank you very much.